it's Kevin. I'm here in Miami at the Intralogistex USA Conference, and I'm in the EPG booth. And I'm going to be joined by Javier Esteve of EPG, and we're going to learn a little bit about EPG, fragmented technology, and talk a little bit about how to bring your systems together and when is the right time to bring your systems together. So, Javier, thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me on, Kevin. EPG is, as I say to many people, you may not have heard of us, but you know our customers. And so we've been doing this for over 35 years. The company started in Germany in 1987 and now serve over 1,600 customers globally and have over 1,000 employees. And we provide logistics solutions that some would think of us mostly as WMS or our Lydia Voice solution. But in reality, we're a unified supply chain execution suite. We provide a lot of applications to support automation, transportation, basically all the components of fulfilling logistics responsibilities.
Yeah, so basically all the different parts from a system perspective that enable all the movement to happen.
All the tools necessary depending on what the job is for the customer. And as well as that, we do the services and do our own implementations as well. Work with partners when needed, but typically we drive the implementation.
Yeah, absolutely, and very interesting, and to have all those different parts, right? So tell us a little bit about, because you have EPG is the company, right? But you have this platform EPG One as well, which is kind of like a single source of truth. So tell us a little bit about what that is and how does it become that single source of truth?
Yeah, so I mean, typically when I think of that, I think of the data, the important elements, the master data as residing in one system, whether it's ERP or WMS. And for inventory, it should be WMS. And so tracking those movements and what's required to do that really is what defines the complexity of an operation. So Gartner, for instance, qualifies uh, warehouse operations as sort of 5 different levels, from single storage location, very simple at a 1, to highly automated and system-driven activity at a level 5. And what really differentiates what's required from a 1 to a 5 is how complex is your material movement process. With a lot of locations, how do you need to move things? Do you have a broad network? How do you organize inventory? How do you do fulfillment? Do you cross-dock? All those things come into play, and all of those things generate their own data. So as you start to address those complexities, you might introduce different applications, but they've got to consume the same data. So it's very important to try and simplify that and provide that uniform single source of data, whether it's coming from disparate systems or not. And the challenge now is to create that data in a way so that it's consumable by things like artificial intelligence, so that that data can be consumed in a way that's, I guess, provides more utility depending on what the use case is without having to recreate the data. So it may be a single source of data, a lot of different data attributes. So that has to be sort of meta tagged and vectored in a way that it's consumable in different applications in different ways, but still one source of data.
Interesting, interesting. So and you mentioned in there, from a level 1 to like a level 5, I think you said, right? So tell us a little bit about what type of companies fit into the EPG kind of ecosphere there.
Great question. So while our system is very configurable, and that allows us to simplify for an operation that may be a level 2 or a lower level 3 facility. The reality is where we're really a good fit is level 3 to level 5. In fact, Gartner has rated us the number 1 WMS solution in terms of being able to support a highly automated environment. What that really means, when I look at big customers, I think the advantage of us being able to cross that level 1 to level 5 threshold is that when you look at big organizations, they're going to have locations, facilities that are highly automated. They're going to have facilities that are less automated. And they're going to have facilities in some cases that are cross-dock. You've got pallets in and pallets out. There's not a lot of personnel there. They can't have a lot of system overlay. And it's got to be simple. A lot of times I see solutions that are very capable of addressing the higher end of that. It's not effective, cost effective to be able to support that simpler site. So one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is the high level of configurability so that we're able to support both those environments. But if you have to say, where do we fit and play best? We'd have to say in that level 3 to level 5, because that's where you really get the value of the horsepower and the robustness that our system's able to provide.
What are people looking for? I mean, what are organizations looking for right now from a system perspective to be able to support some of those initiatives?
Well, I think you got to back into that question, and it's why are they looking for something? It's the problems that they're facing. And one of those is the labor situation. In these organizations where they're highly reliant on large labor pools, and that's the biggest cost factor for a logistics operation, it's labor. Labor and transportation. Those are the two big ones that they've got to tackle. And so they're always looking to try and create efficiency. And that's where the automation starts to get looked at. How can we do two things? And it's not just replacing labor, but it's also making it a better environment, a better user experience for that associate, that warehouse worker, which may mean introducing robots where it's a situation where unloading there's heavy cases, their items come in heavy cases, and unloading a truck is very taxing and moving that around. So maybe the automation in that case makes sense to be able to make it a better user experience so that they're helping support their workers. The challenge that I see from people is trying to balance the right level of investment and the productivity that they'll get from that investment of automation against what they can do with human resources. And there could be different factors. It could be, the nature of the job and what's it take, and it could be simply a matter of the workforce that's available to them. So it's a big challenge because if you have turnover, that means that a new worker has to be not just trained, but become efficient. And when you think of labor management and what goes on in a warehouse, it's all about getting people to what's considered 100% efficiency, whether that's an engineered labor standard or just the standard established by the organization. And if it takes them 1,000 orders to get there and you've got 100% turnover a year, well, you're going to have a lot of employees that never get to that 1,000 or so. They're never 100% efficiency. And that lack of efficiency and productivity costs a large company tens of millions or more dollars a year in lost productivity.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point to make there because I mean, that is something, it's one thing to attract the employees, right? And try and get them. And that's hard enough, right? But then to try and keep them in the building and get them, like you said, to that productivity level where we're getting the most out of them that we possibly can and the expectation, right? I think that's a big thing there. So from a behind the scenes systems perspective, right? That can happen and then orchestration can be happening in there, but what about from like a user perspective? Like how do you make sure that that's also enabling them to have easier training or get up to that productivity number faster?
Yeah, so in a number of ways, depending on the solution, if you look at a statistic on warehouse like that one. Yeah. So if you look at that, that's an employee supportive application because many warehouse workers are compensated based on productivity. So if it's a solution that helps them be more productive and is more ergonomically friendly to them by keeping their hands free, for instance, freeing them from scanners and repetitive motions. So studies have shown that the user satisfaction in warehouse using voice is 84% compared to, I believe the number's around 56% for non-voice solution. So that's a big difference when you're struggling to retain employees to maintain those levels of productivity. In other ways, and some of the new innovative ways in which we're approaching that topic as well are just introducing new technologies to those employees through the assistance of AI, which in some cases may mean their ability to interface with a system, particularly a new system, and learn it can be supported through AI. So an employee could ask AI, hey, how do I set up a multi-stage picking process? Well, if you don't know and you're not familiar with that system, it can feel uncomfortable for them to ask or to feel like they don't know something they should know, or if they just think that there may be a better way to do something with the system. The employee is able to direct themselves to understand how those processes could be not only done, but actually implemented in the software. Our dashboard tool is one of the applications of AI there. If you want to build a new widget for a KPI, you don't do it through the keyboard. You can do it through our agentive AI. So they'll simply say, I'd like to see a dashboard based on productivity metrics around unloading.
Okay. And
And
it'll
the
just create it.
system can build that widget itself.
Interesting. I like that, definitely. Yeah, and I think that's a huge advantage there, especially for like a leadership level in a warehouse, right? Just to say like, oh, I want to see this particular thing, and typically you got to wait for your analyst or something to come up with it, but that sounds like it's very much on demand.
Yeah, and it's funny. It creates an environment where the employees understand that they're sort of expected to innovate themselves and do more, and they're able to do so. And I think everybody likes being a hero.
So, people want to be the hero, but oftentimes there's a lot of technology, right, in this space. And you talked about this morning in your talk a little bit about this idea of kind of fragmented technology, right? So I guess maybe before we get to the solution, why is there just so much fragmented technology within organizations?
Well, I think you got to put part of it on the vendors. It's an approach that both the buyer and the seller have just been accustomed to because it's been tradition. You know, you don't always look at things holistically. Hey, we've got a burning issue. What can we throw at it? Another side of the approach from vendors and the way they've designed applications. It used to be that, you had your ERP and your ERP had an inventory management component to it and it did other things. And really, the ERP vendors just wanted to build that out to address every component. Well, as people need more productivity and more efficiency in a particular function, that function becomes more specialized. There's more value associated to it, and it breeds an application. So you started to see things like CRM, more advanced warehouse management, RF introduced into the process. And so you start to spin off different applications that now were separate from an ERP and maybe by a different vendor. And now you have potentially siloed, fragmented data pools and processes. So, what's changed, I think, in the digital transformation is that companies are becoming better and there's more technology to support the ability for them to not only integrate those processes and those systems, but actually the data. And what we're seeing now with the concept of large data models and natural language models is to try and standardize that so that it's consumable. That same data set is consumable by those different applications. I think another approach that sometimes happens is that people try and do too much at once. So you've got to walk a little bit before you run. And I think when people look at automation and systems in general and trying to apply systems to fix business problems, they need to take that approach. I think they can better position themselves for long-term growth and that agility that's required in the supply chain today because requirements, whether they're regulatory requirements in the food and beverage, it's the FSMA Act. That's been coming and is coming, and pharmaceutical has a number of those. If you're not in a position to address that with flexibility that's been built into your systems, then the only way you can accomplish that is with disjointed processes, additional data, and more labor.
It's interesting there you touched on like multiple different points about this fragmentation, right? And how it kind of, you probably, obviously that's not like the goal is to be fragmented with all these different tech, but like you said, there's too many things going on at once, right? And it just like spurs all these things, or we're getting specialized in this area, so we need another system to handle that. So with EPG, you have multiple different components, right? So how do you kind of engage with a new customer, and is it like a layered on approach, like they start with one system and then they evolve it and add on these other features as well? How does that normally work?
The approach you want to take in general is to start with that MVP model, the minimum viable product. And that doesn't mean that you're dumbing down what's happening for that customer, but it means let's meet those needs with as little change, complexity, and introduction of new systems as possible, and then let you understand that tool and the environment and how technology and not necessarily a new application might be the way to solve that business issue. And that's also one of the ways to fight that fragmented, proliferation of systems in an environment. When you look at how specialty applications are built, a lot of times there's a small set of functionality that system didn't do well. Like those original ERP with inventory management that really didn't do robust warehouse management logistics functions. And so something was needed. Well, the company that addressed that added value and robustness and capability, and then it spawned a new class of application. Well, what ends up happening then is that even those smaller functions end up getting drawn into that large application, not just a single application, but that class of companies that are now fulfilling and providing that solution. And so that becomes the standard. So now when you need to meet even the minimum set of those, you go and you get an application for which you may not really need 80% of that functionality. So you see that a lot with companies as they're looking to replace solutions. They really acquired to solve something very specific, but they didn't need that kind of an application. And so they're not using more than 20, 50% of the capability of the application. So one of the ways to address that, and particularly what's going on, today with technology and AI and the way it's being used, is that maybe we don't need an application. Maybe we need a technology. And the technology can address that requirement without introducing another application. Now, a lot of those are very specific, why you'd have a WCS or a dock management or a transportation management system. Those are real requirements and they do require specialized capabilities. But one of the things that we've done with our approach is to make those components of our supply chain execution suite modular design so that if those systems are already in place for the customer, they're able to integrate into that supply chain execution suite where it could be our WMS and somebody else's TMS and somebody else's voice, or our voice and somebody else's WMS, etc.
Yeah.
And so designing things in a way that allows the customer maximum flexibility to try and limit the proliferation of applications where possible and leverage what they have when possible.
Yeah, interesting and very smart approach there, right? To be able to add those on as you need them in a sense, right? And I think you have a great point there about like, people put stuff in place and they're only using 20%, 50% of it and they're not getting the maximum value, right? And how is that missing? So, as we look at this and kind of this fragmented technology and, how people get kind of disjointed in that way or don't reach the full capacity of things, I mean, how do people recognize that it's time to engage with somebody like an EPG to get things under control and kind of bring us more cohesive together?
I think when it becomes obvious to them is when trading partners or their employees or their suppliers say, we're having an issue here that needs to be addressed. So at some point, they hit a wall, but we want people to, instead of being reactive in that way, to be a little more proactive. And that's where I think you got to have that. That's why walking before you run is important and understanding what's available from a technology to make those processes better before you just go and invest in necessarily in an application. And extending the life of what you've got, sometimes the answer to that can be technology, not an application.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great way to put it and, a great way to end this conversation too, as well. And I think, if people want to learn more about EPG or get connected to you all to explore this idea more and maybe get some more cohesiveness there and better systems in place, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, get in contact with us and reach out to us through our website, connect with us on LinkedIn, meet us at trade shows, and more importantly, invite us to come in and talk to you and see your facility and try and apply some thought leadership and have some discussion because honestly, in the rapid pace at which things are done and the buyer's journey is very different now. A lot of it's done ahead of time and it's all, sort of boiled down to an RFI or RFP, and there's not a lot interaction, in my opinion, which does not give the customer the opportunity to really get the best understanding of what's available in the market in general or how they can best work with a particular supplier. Whether it's EPG or another vendor, I would just encourage customers to spend a little more time in the the discovery and discussion and a little closer to the vendors and the solutions before they put it on paper and come up with a list of requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. Open up that dialogue, definitely. And
Dialogue is good.
you can open up the dialogue with Javier here, and we'll put all that information about EPG in the show notes as well as at thenewwarehouse.com. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Kevin. Pleasure.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesAreSexy.com and get your own.